The wind screamed across the frozen land. Snow fell so hard it was like white knives cutting the sky. In the middle of this storm, a lonely figure stumbled forward. She was not human. The alien woman had skin like soft gray stone and long white, hair that blew wildly in the wind. Her body was wrapped in thin, torn cloth. She had no boots. Her feet bled in the snow, but she kept moving. In her arms, she held a small bundle, a child. The child was silent now, too cold, too weak to cry. The mother held him tighter. Her arms were shaking. She whispered softly, "Stay awake, little one. Don't sleep." But she knew the truth. The child was dying. A few miles away, a man sat in a small wooden cabin. The fire crackled beside him. He sipped hot tea and looked outside. The snowstorm was worse than ever. His name was Daniel, a human, a mechanic who lived alone. He had come to this alien planet to fix machines, not save lives. But something tonight felt wrong. He stood up and opened the cabin door. Cold air slapped his face. The wind howled like a beast. Then he heard it. A sound. Faint. Far. A cry. Not a wolf. Not wind. It was too soft. Too full of pain. He stepped out, grabbing his coat and boots. Back in the storm, the alien woman fell to her knees. Her vision blurred. She could not see the road anymore. Her lips turned blue. Her hands froze around her child. She tried to stand, but her legs gave up. She lay down in the snow, whispering one last time, "Forgive me." The child's hand slipped from hers. Daniel walked fast through the storm. The snow hit his face like sharp sand. He followed the sound, step by step, one cry, then another, then silence. "No, no, no," he muttered. Then he saw something, a shape in the snow. He ran to it and gasped. It was a small alien child, half buried in the snow, face pale, eyes closed, barely breathing. Daniel didn't think. He took off his coat, wrapped the child tightly, and lifted him up. "Where's your mother?" he asked softly. No answer. He rushed back to his cabin. The fire was still alive. He laid the child near the heat, wrapped him in blankets, and checked. His pulse. Still alive. He made warm soup, just broth, and slowly placed a spoon near the child's lips. A soft, weak sip. The child moved slightly. Daniel smiled. "You're safe now." But his heart was not at ease. Where was the mother? Why had this child been alone in such a deadly storm? He looked back at the snowy night outside. It was still, wild and angry, but something deep inside him said, "Go back." Far away, the alien mother still lay in the snow. Her body had stopped shaking. Her eyes barely moved, but her heart whispered one name over and over, her son's name. A tear froze on her cheek. She thought it was the end. Back at the cabin, the child suddenly coughed. Daniel rushed to him. The boy's eyes opened just a little. He whispered a word. "Mama." Daniel froze. The boy said it again, weak but clear. "Mama." Cold. The human man stood up and looked outside again. He grabbed his boots, coat, a flashlight, and a thermal blanket. "I'm coming for her," he said. The wind had grown worse, but Daniel didn't stop. He followed the child's tiny footprints, half covered by new snow. They led far, near the trees, down a hill, and finally to a shape lying under a tree. He ran to her. The alien woman was not moving. Her arms were curled as if still holding her child. Her lips were blue, her eyes shut. Daniel checked her neck. There was a pulse. Weak, but real. He wrapped the thermal blanket around her and gently picked her up. She was light as feathers but cold like stone. He whispered, "I've got you now. He's safe. You will be too." As the wind howled around them, a human man carried a frozen alien mother through the storm, back toward the fire, back toward her child, and back toward a new beginning neither of them expected. The cabin door slammed open with the storm behind it. Daniel entered, carrying the alien woman in his arms. Snow dropped from his coat and boots. His face was red from the cold, but his grip was steady. Inside, the small alien child lay wrapped in blankets beside the fire, breathing slowly. Daniel placed the mother on the floor near the warmth, gently as if she were made of glass. Her skin was ice cold, her lips purple. She didn't move. He looked at both of them. "You two nearly froze to death out there." He moved quickly. He pulled out his emergency heat packs and pressed them to her chest and arms. He rubbed her hands, carefully. Then he placed warm towels on her face and neck. A kettle of water was already boiling. He poured some into a cup and dipped a cloth into it, patting her forehead. Time passed. Then, her fingers twitched. The alien child, still too weak to speak, turned his head slightly. His half-open eyes fell on the figure beside him. He blinked once, then again. A soft sound came from his throat. Daniel turned his head quickly. The boy's tiny hand stretched toward the mother. Daniel helped him. The child's cold fingers touched her arm, and his lips moved, barely making a sound. "Mama?" At that word, the woman stirred. Her lips moved slightly. Her eyelids fluttered. She tried to open her eyes, but everything was blurry. The heat, the firelight, the strange smells. She didn't know where she was, and then she heard it. "Mama." That voice. That tiny voice. Her son. She sat up suddenly, heart racing, eyes wide. But she didn't recognize the room. Panic filled her chest. Where is he?" she whispered, her voice dry and cracked. Daniel raised his hands gently. "It's okay. He's here. He's safe." She turned her head and saw him, her child, alive, breathing, wrapped in blankets beside the fire. Her body collapsed with relief. She crawled to him and held him close, weeping softly. Her thin shoulders shook with every breath. Daniel stepped back and gave them space. Minutes passed. The woman finally looked up. Her eyes met Daniel's. They were full of confusion and fear. He knelt beside the fire, not too close. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't reply. He pointed to the warm bowl near her. "Soup. Eat. Please." She hesitated, then picked it up with shaky hands. It was hot, but not too hot. She took one sip, then another. Her body, starved and frozen, welcomed it like a gift from the stars. The cabin was quiet now, just the soft crackle of the fire and the sound of snow hitting the roof. Daniel watched them for a while. He wondered who they were, where they came from, why they had been alone in the storm. He didn't ask. He just kept the fire burning. Hours passed. The child finally spoke again, his voice a little stronger. "Who is he?" he asked, looking at Daniel. The mother didn't answer at first. Then she said softly, "He saved us." Daniel stood. "I'll make more food." He went to the small kitchen corner. Behind him, the mother whispered, "Why?" He turned. "Why? Did you help us?" she asked. He shrugged. No one else did. She stared at him. On her world, strangers did not help, especially not humans. Outside, the wind still blew, but inside, for the first time in days, warmth and life returned to a mother and her child, because one man listened to a cry in the storm and chose to care. The morning came slow and gray. The storm outside had calmed, but thick snow still covered everything. Daniel stood at the window, sipping warm coffee. He watched the trees bend gently in the wind, and his breath fogged the glass. Behind him, the alien woman slept with her child, in her arms, both wrapped in blankets. Their breathing was soft, steady now. The worst had passed for now, but Daniel couldn't forget what he'd seen the night before. He had found her far from any path, near a frozen tree, half buried under snow. The trail that led to her had nearly vanished. If he had been 1 hour late, they would have both been gone. As the woman stirred awake again, Daniel turned. "Morning," he said gently. She blinked, unsure, but nodded. Her voice was quiet. The child? Still sleeping, Daniel replied, smiling. Peacefully. She hugged the little boy closer. His body was warm now. His fingers no longer shook. My name is Daniel, he said. I live alone. I fix machines. I don't get visitors much, especially not from the snow. She stayed silent. Her hands trembled. Daniel stepped away. It's okay. You don't have to tell me anything. Not yet. Later, she sat up slowly, leaning against the cabin wall. Her eyes scanned the room, the tools on the shelves, the wood stove, the small cot in the corner. It was not fancy, but it was safe. The child opened his eyes, then smiled. Mama. She kissed his forehead, eyes full of love. He whispered, He helped us. She looked at Daniel again. Why? He sighed. That's not easy to explain. She watched him carefully. In our last village, when the snow came, we asked for help. He nodded. No one gave it, she said. They shut their doors. Daniel didn't speak. She continued slowly. We had no food. My mate died last winter. I had only my son. I walked from house to house carrying him. They saw me. They heard him cry, but no one, not even one, opened their door. She looked down. So I walked. I kept walking, hoping for somewhere else. Daniel listened, hands still. 3 days, she whispered. 3 nights. I carried him through the snow. Her voice broke. And then, I fell. There was silence. Daniel finally said, I'm sorry. She didn't expect that. You shouldn't be, she said bitterly. You're not one of them. I'm not, Daniel agreed. I'm human. She looked at him for a long time. Then finally asked, Why did you come back for me? He looked out the window. Because your son asked for his mama. That night after dinner, the woman told him her name. Thalea, she said. And your boy? Riven. Daniel smiled. He's strong. He is, she replied softly. But I was weak. I almost let him go. Daniel shook his head. No, you carried him through death's door. That's not weakness. That's what a real mother does. As Thalea lay beside her sleeping son that night, she stared at the cabin roof. The warmth was strange. The silence, peaceful. But part of her mind still remembered the frozen trail, the miles she walked alone, the doors that shut in her face, the wind that almost took her child, and she remembered the only door that opened. Outside, the storm had finally ended. The trail she had left behind was buried now, completely gone. But ahead of her, for the first time in forever, something new was waiting. The sun dipped low behind the icy hills, painting the snow in soft shades of orange and gold. Inside the wooden cabin, a quiet peace filled the air. Thalea sat beside the fire, brushing Riven's soft hair as he leaned into her side, sleepy but safe. Daniel placed a small bowl of warm stew on the table. There's more if you're hungry, Thalea nodded gratefully. Thank you, for everything. Daniel gave a soft smile but said nothing. He wasn't used to praise. He just did what felt right. But later that evening, as the sky turned dark and stars began to shine, Thalea stepped outside. Daniel followed her with his eyes through the window. She stood barefoot on the wooden porch, her arms wrapped around her body. She looked up at the sky, at the 2 moons of this alien world glowing above the frozen trees. Tears formed in her eyes. She whispered a name, one Daniel couldn't hear. He opened the door gently and stepped beside her. You okay? Thalea nodded slowly. This sky reminds me of home. You're not from the nearby villages, are you? He asked. She shook her head. No, my kind lived far north, in the caves where the light glows from the walls. We had warmth there, Until the sickness came. Then the cold came. Then the silence. Daniel looked at her. She turned to him. You said you fix machines. Do you fix hearts too? He blinked. Her voice was soft. Because mine, it's broken. Daniel didn't know what to say, so he didn't speak. He took off his jacket, gently placed it over her shoulders, and walked back inside. She stayed there a while, standing in moonlight, wrapped in a stranger's warmth. Her heart felt heavy, but not as alone as before. Later, that night after Riven had fallen asleep, Daniel lit a small oil lamp and sat at the table. He scribbled in his notebook, trying to remember which broken water pump he needed to repair next week. Thalea sat across from him, watching. You live here alone? She asked. He nodded. Yeah. People don't like humans too much around here. Easier to stay away. She tilted her head. Why? He chuckled softly. They say humans are loud, pushy, dangerous. And are you? He looked at her. Then smiled. Maybe just the loud part. Thalea laughed for the first time in days. It was quiet, unsure, but real. She lowered her eyes. You're different. I get that a lot, Daniel replied. Silence filled the room again, but it was not heavy. It was calm, warm like the fire crackling beside them. Then Thalea whispered, They called me cursed. Daniel stopped writing. She continued. After my mate died, people said it was a sign, that I had bad blood. When I begged for food, they closed their doors. When I cried in the snow, they turned away. Daniel clenched his jaw. Monsters. No, she said gently. They were just afraid. He looked at her carefully. And you? Are you afraid? Thalea looked over at Riven, sleeping peacefully. I was, she said, but not anymore. The wind outside calmed even more. The two moons above cast a silver light through the frosted window. Daniel stood and placed another log in the fire. He glanced back at Thalea. You can stay here, as long as you want. Her lips parted slightly. You mean that? He nodded. You and Riven, you don't have to walk alone anymore. Her eyes watered again. This time they were not tears of fear, but of hope. As the night deepened, Thalea curled beside her child near the fire. For the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. No snow, no hunger, no locked doors, only warmth. And a human who looked at her like she mattered. Outside, the trail she had walked through the snow was already gone, but under the moonlight, something better had been found. Not just safety, but someone who cared. A thin ray of light broke through the frosted window. It touched Thalea's face gently, waking her from the first peaceful sleep she'd had in many nights. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The warm fire, the wooden walls, the soft blanket wrapped around her. It didn't feel real. Then she felt the little weight beside her, Riven, curled up safely at her side. She pulled him close and sighed. Safe, alive, warm. These were not things she had felt in a long time. The smell of something cooking filled the air. It wasn't alien food, but it smelled good. Her stomach growled. Slowly she sat up. At the wooden table stood Daniel. A pan hissed on the stove. He turned and smiled. Morning. I didn't want to wake you. Thalea blinked. You cooked? Daniel shrugged. Not much, just eggs and root bread. It's human food. Might not taste great to you. She stood, holding Riven in her arms. It smells better than anything I've known. As they ate, together at the table, Thalea glanced around again. There were tools on the walls, little machines on shelves, drawings pinned with nails, a tiny life neatly organized. But something caught her eye. In the corner, tucked under a cover, was a small bed, made not for Daniel, but for Riven. You made that last night? She asked softly. Daniel looked over. Yeah. Couldn't have him sleeping on the floor. He's a tough kid, but still. Thalea's eyes watered again. But this time she wiped the tears away before they could fall. After breakfast, Riven played quietly with a few old tools, while Daniel fixed a broken radio. Thalea watched them both from across the room, unsure what to feel. Was this safety? Could this last? Was it a trick, or was this truly kindness? Daniel caught her staring. He set his tools down and walked over. You don't have to be afraid here, he said gently. She looked away. It's not that easy. I know. Thalea's voice was low. In my village, even smiling at a stranger was dangerous. Kindness always came with a price. Daniel didn't argue. He walked to the shelf, pulled down a folded blanket and offered it to her. This one's softer, he said. Yours now. She stared at the fabric in his hands, then whispered, Why do you keep giving me things? Daniel's answer came without pause. Because someone should have done it sooner. She took the blanket in her hands. It was nothing fancy, worn, old, patched in 2 places, but it felt heavier than anything she had carried. He wasn't giving her just cloth. He was giving her dignity. Later that day, Daniel opened a storage box and handed Riven a small, handmade, wooden animal. The boy gasped. For me? Daniel nodded. Made it a few years back. Never found anyone to give it to. Thalea watched her son giggle, holding the toy tight. Her heart ached, and slowly her fear began to melt. As the sun set again, she stood by the window and looked at the snow-covered hills. She remembered falling, bleeding, begging, and then this. Man with calloused hands, tired eyes, and a heart that didn't ask questions. That night, after Riven fell asleep in his new bed, Thalea sat beside the fire. Daniel placed a cup of hot root tea in her hands. I've lived alone for a long time, he said. Didn't think I needed anyone. She smiled weakly. I forgot what it felt like, to be treated like I matter. He looked at her. And this time, he didn't look away. Outside, the cold still ruled the world, but inside this small cabin, kindness had lit a fire stronger than any storm. And for the first time, the alien mother stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about tomorrow. The snow had stopped falling days ago, and the sun now peeked weakly through thick clouds. For the first time in weeks, the air outside was calm. Inside the cabin, laughter echoed softly. Riven chased a tiny wind-up robot Daniel had repaired. It clicked and clacked across the floor, and the little alien boy squealed with joy. His mother, Thalea, sat nearby, her hands sewing an old blanket. Daniel watched them both from the workbench, pretending to be busy with tools. But his eyes kept drifting toward them. They looked like a family, but outside this cabin the world was not so kind. A knock came at the door. Hard, fast. Daniel stood slowly. His hand hovered near the wrench on the table. He opened the door. 3 figures stood outside, wrapped in heavy coats and snow hoods. All of them were from the nearby outpost, a rough, suspicious village that had barely accepted Daniel himself. Mechanic, one of them said coldly. You've got visitors. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Didn't know I invited anyone. Another man stepped forward. We saw her, the alien, and the kid. Daniel's grip on the door tightened. So? They're not registered. The first man snapped. No ID tags, no camp records. She's a stray, and you're harboring her. Daniel stayed silent. Send her out, the third man barked. Let the system deal with it. Inside, Thalea froze. She had heard everything. Riven crawled closer to her, sensing her fear. Daniel stepped outside, closing the door behind him. His voice was calm but sharp. Let me be clear, she almost died in that storm, so did her boy. You know how many people passed them by? The man smirked. Not our problem. Daniel's voice dropped. It is now, the second man growled. She's a burden. A risk. We don't need more mouths to feed. Daniel's eyes burned. You left her to die. I didn't. That makes her my responsibility now. There was silence. Then the men turned and walked away, leaving only heavy footprints in the snow. Daniel came back inside. His face was red with anger, but he forced a smile for Thalea and Riven. "They won't come back," he said. Thalea stared at the floor. "They're right. I am a burden." Daniel walked to her, kneeling in front of her chair. "Don't say that. You carried your son across miles of snow. You kept him alive. That's not weakness, that's strength." Her voice cracked. "Then why does the world treat me like trash?" He paused, then spoke softly. "Because the world's wrong." That night, Thalea sat outside under the stars. Daniel joined her, offering a cup of tea. She didn't take it. "Why are you risking everything for us?" she asked. Daniel leaned back against the wooden post. "Because when I needed help once, no one came for me either. Maybe I'm just tired of seeing good people left behind." She finally accepted the tea. Her hands trembled as she held the cup. "I was once proud," she said quietly. "Before all this. Before my mate died. Before the snow came. I had a home, a name, a voice." She looked at Daniel. "You reminded me I still do." He didn't speak, just sat beside her, quiet and steady like the moonlight. Inside, Riven slept soundly, hugging his wooden toy. Outside, two broken souls sat under the stars. One human, one alien, but somehow no longer strangers. Tomorrow would bring more problems, more judgment, more eyes watching. But tonight, the fire burned warm, not just in the cabin, but in their hearts. They had been called burdens, but together they were becoming something stronger. The key to wind had changed again, but this time it didn't scream. It whispered. The snow outside Daniel's cabin had started to melt in patches. Ice dripped slowly from the wooden roof. Little by little, the world was beginning to wake after the long winter. Inside, warmth and quiet filled the room. Thalea stood near the stove, helping Daniel stir a pot of stew. She moved slowly, still not used to being part of something. Steady, safe, wanted. Behind them, Riven sat at the small table drawing something with a piece of charcoal on scrap paper. Daniel peeked over his shoulder. "What are you making?" The little boy grinned. "Our house." Daniel blinked. "This cabin?" Riven nodded. "It's our home now, right?" Thalea turned to Daniel. Their eyes met. And in that moment, neither of them spoke, but both understood. Later that day, Daniel walked into town for supplies. People stared, whispered. Some crossed the road to avoid him. Others looked at him with disgust. But Daniel kept walking, head high. He didn't care what they thought. When he returned with food and fabric, Riven ran to hug his legs. Thalea stood at the door, hands nervously twisting in front of her. "Was it bad?" she asked. Daniel chuckled. "Let them talk." That night, Daniel worked late on a small heater unit. Thalea helped him, holding pieces steady with her careful hands. Riven had already fallen asleep, his toy tucked under his arm. A soft silence settled between the two adults. Then, without looking up, Thalea said, "Do you ever regret helping us?" Daniel paused. He shook his head. "Never," Thalea whispered. "Even if they come for you, even if they drive you out?" He looked at her. "Then I'll build another cabin and you'll both come with me." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand you," she said. Daniel smiled. "I don't understand me either sometimes." Then, he looked at her. Really looked. "You don't have to keep running anymore. You're not a burden here. You're not alone." Her voice cracked. "You talk like we're something." Daniel stood up slowly, stepping closer. "We are." In the quiet, she reached out and took his hand. No fear, no shame, just warmth. Connection. Home. The next morning, they began fixing up the spare room. Not for guests, but for family. Daniel showed Riven how to hammer in wooden boards, and the boy smiled, so wide it lit the whole room. Thalea painted the old walls with dye from local berries, turning the gray space into something bright and soft. They laughed. They built. They created something together. Weeks passed. Daniel no longer ate alone. Thalea no longer woke up afraid, and Riven, he started calling Daniel something new. Dad. It slipped out once during dinner. The boy froze. Thalea froze. Daniel looked at him and then smiled. Yeah, he said gently. I guess I am. That night, Thalea stood by the window again, staring at the stars. So many nights ago, she had almost died under those same stars, body frozen, heart broken. Now, standing in the same place, a blanket around her shoulders, she heard the man she once feared laugh in the next room with her child. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you. Storms come to destroy, but sometimes they bring people together. Sometimes the coldest nights lead to the warmest homes, and sometimes the strongest families are built not from blood but from hope."